It was during the height of the pandemic in 2021 when Miss Nan, a saleswoman who spent most of her time traveling across southern Thailand, encountered the most terrifying night of her life. She was used to life on the road, living out of suitcases, sleeping in cheap motels, and eating from gas station stalls. But when the government suddenly announced the closure of all hotels nationwide due to the spread of the virus, her job became nearly impossible. The southern provinces she managed had all turned into red zones, and her regular accommodations shut their doors overnight. Desperate, she turned to Facebook groups where traveling salespeople shared secret contacts for small, hidden lodgings that still accepted guests. Most were tucked deep inside coconut plantations or far from the main towns. Still, anything was better than sleeping in her car. One afternoon, after hours of searching, a stranger messaged her. The profile picture showed a middle-aged man with a kind smile. He offered her a room for only $9, claiming he'd already booked it under her name. Grateful and exhausted, she thanked him repeatedly and followed the GPS pin he sent. By the time she entered the province, the sun was dipping behind the hills. The GPS instructed her to turn off the main highway into a narrow dirt road. It began with scattered homes, then grew darker, wilder, lined with dense palms and vines. There were no lights, no stores, no sound but the whirring of insects. Her heart pounded faster the deeper she went. Finally, the GPS announced, "You've arrived." But what stood before her was no hotel. Only an old sign, barely visible under thick ivy. The cracked wooden board bore faint letters of what must once have been the hotel's name. Behind it, a gravel path disappeared into overgrown trees. She wanted to leave, yet with dusk falling and no other place to go, she convinced herself to trust the stranger who had helped her. Slowly, she drove inside. The asphalt soon turned to dirt and loose stones. She noticed a blackened patch in the middle of the road, a mound of ashes, as if someone had recently burned leaves. Her tires left the first marks through it, meaning no car had entered for days. The deeper she went, the heavier the air became. Tall trees loomed on either side, blocking the last of the light. Then, as she rounded a bend, something on the left caught her eye. A large funerary urn, shaped like a temple stupa, standing among weeds. A chill ran down her spine. She pulled out her phone, snapped a picture, and sent it to a friend with the message, "This place is creepy." But before she could hit send, movement flickered to her right. A wrinkled face appeared at her car window. An elderly woman stood there, lips stained bright red from betel nut. Smiling so widely her eyes nearly vanished. "Stay short time? Or overnight, child?" she asked sweetly, leaning close to the glass. Nan's pulse jumped. Her hands trembled as she stammered that someone had booked the room for her. The old woman nodded cheerfully. Overnight then. Room number 7. Drive down. Last one. She pointed with a crooked finger. There were no other cars in sight, no sound of life anywhere. But with no choice, Nan followed the direction. The row of rooms was old, their paint peeling like dry skin. Room 7 sat at the far end, pressed against a wall of dark palms. She pushed open the heavy wooden door. A wave of air, stale, suffocating, hit her chest. The place wasn't dirty, but it felt wrong. A 6-foot bed stood under a ceiling fan that didn't spin. A faded wardrobe leaned in one corner. The bathroom door, half rotted, stood ajar. Inside, the wall didn't reach the ceiling, leaving a gap above, as though the room could breathe. Or watch. She dropped her bag, sat on the bed, and felt a pressure in her chest. Her instincts screamed to leave. But outside, the darkness had swallowed everything. Trying to distract herself, she opened her laptop and began replying to emails. But a sound came from the bathroom, the splash of water. It was faint, rhythmic, like hands being washed. She froze. The water stopped. Moments later came the heavy click of a toilet flush. It gurgled, drained, and hissed, until silence filled the room again. Nan turned off her laptop. Her fingers shook as she lay down, wrapping the blanket around herself. Sleep came in fragments, her mind teetering between wakefulness and nightmare. A sudden jolt. Something shoved her from the left side of the bed. She gasped, barely catching herself before falling. Heart racing, she moved back to the center, pulled the blanket over her head, and whispered a prayer. Minutes later, it happened again. Another push, harder. Tears filled her eyes. From outside, the faint crunch of dry leaves echoed. Footsteps circling the room. She listened for 10 endless minutes until it stopped. Silence returned, heavy as stone. She lowered the blanket just enough to peek toward the bathroom. The light she'd left on still glowed dimly, and there, she saw it. A woman's silhouette crouched on the ceiling fan. The figure was black and thin, hair hanging down in tangled clumps. Two pale eyes glimmered in the dark, staring straight at her. Nan couldn't scream. The world blurred. The air froze. Her body went cold. Her lungs refused to breathe. Then, the figure dropped. She leapt up, bolting for the door. She didn't stop to grab anything. She just ran. Through the night, through the gravel, until she reached her car and slammed the door shut. After that, everything went black. She didn't even feel herself fall asleep, only the sudden, terrifying pull into darkness, as though her mind had been switched off. She awoke at dawn, slumped in the driver's seat of her car, parked on the main road, miles from the hotel. Her clothes were still the pajamas she'd slept in. Disoriented and shaking, she turned the key and drove back. But when she reached the old entrance, fear stopped her from going in. A young woman emerged from the trees, the same facial features as the old lady, but younger. When Nan called out, the woman frowned in confusion. She explained that her mother, the elderly lady, suffered from Alzheimer's and often wandered off. The man who had booked Nan's room really existed, she confirmed, but he had reserved room 5. Somehow the old woman had mistaken her and taken her to room 7 instead. Room 7, the one that was never used. Because years ago, a woman had been murdered there, beaten by her lover, a truck driver who disappeared the next morning. Nan said nothing. She only demanded her belongings, still sitting untouched in front of the office, then drove away. Weeks later, she told the story to a senior salesman. He went pale. He'd stayed there too, years before. He asked if her room had a ceiling fan with a rose sticker on one blade. Her blood turned cold. "Yes," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "That's the room. I saw her too." Miss Nan quit her southern route soon after. She now worked in Bangkok, preferring city hotels and crowded streets. But sometimes, when she thinks back to that night, she still hears the voice of the old woman asking gently, "Did you sleep well, child?" If you enjoyed this true Thai horror story, subscribe to Tale After Dark for more chilling tales every week.